Hey, welcome back to Homeschool Wherever. My name is Carmen Sognonvi, and in this video, I'm going to share with you a couple of really cool marine life learning experiences we had on our recent trip to Puerto Vallarta. So I touched on this a little bit in my previous video where I talked about our unit study on Jacques Cousteau. And the reason that we picked Jacques Cousteau as the topic of our unit study was because I was expecting that we would be able to do a little excursion to the Marietas Islands in Puerto Vallarta, which is this really cool area, really interesting scenery, great marine life. However, at the last minute, I realized that there was actually an age limit where you had to be 12 and over, so that unfortunately didn't work out. But all was not lost. We ended up doing two really cool marine life learning experiences that really brought to life a lot of the lessons we learned in that unit study about oceans and marine life. We got to release baby sea turtles, and we got to go sea foraging. So in this video, I'm going to share exactly what both of those experiences were like, what our girls learned from that, what we learned, me and Serge, and yeah, keep watching to find out all the details. If you're new to this channel, we are a multiracial secular family living in New York City, and we are homeschooling for the first time this year. We have two daughters, Sean, who's in 6th grade, and Ella, who's in 3rd grade. We're really passionate about using travel to bring our homeschool lessons to life. This channel is all about documenting our homeschooling journey, so if that sounds of interest to you, I hope you'll subscribe, turn on those notifications so you don't miss our next video. We're also full-time family travel creators, so if you want to see that side of our lives, check out our travel channel at Top Flight Family. So on this trip to Puerto Vallarta, we worked with a couple of different properties, and one of them was the Four Seasons Punta Mita. Now, if you want to learn more about that property, I'll have a full review and vlog coming out on the travel channel, Top Flight Family, so you can go check that out there. But in this video, I want to talk specifically about a couple of experiences we had at the resort, which were really incredible for letting our girls learn about marine life. Now, the Four Seasons is obviously a very well-known, well-regarded brand, and you probably think of it just in terms of it being a super high-end luxury brand, which it definitely is. However, one thing that I think not as many people are familiar with is that they have this really fantastic program called Kids for All Seasons. And basically these are a variety of activities for kids, and the details of them can vary from property to property. At some properties, it's really more of a traditional kids club where, you know, you can do arts and crafts and there's a specific room. But in many other properties, they have all kinds of really unique experiences that allow kids to learn about the nature and the culture and the history of that particular destination. So at this property, the Four Seasons Punta Mita, this whole area has really unique marine life. And so a lot of the activities in the Kids for All Seasons program focuses on that. Now, the first experience we did was the turtle release program. And this was so cool and so cute. So we all met up around sunset. I think it was around 7:30 p.m. or so. We met up with our guide. We all walked down to the beach in a group. And before we left, he gave each of us a box. And in this box were the baby sea turtles. And it was really funny because while you're holding the box, you can feel them scrambling around in there. And the amazing thing is that these baby sea turtles were actually hatched at 10 a.m. that day. So they were only 8 hours old. So the really cool thing about the sea turtle release program at the Four Seasons is that all of the funds generated by the fees to do this go directly to the local hatcheries. And the hatcheries will release 10 sea turtles for every 1 sea turtle that we release. And this program has really helped to repopulate the sea turtle population in this area. So our guide drew a line in the sand, and we were told to make sure that we stay behind this line, because the worst thing is that, you know, you run towards the ocean and end up crushing a baby sea turtle. That's something that we do not want. So all of us stayed behind the line. And very carefully, we opened up our boxes, and making sure we didn't have any contact with the turtles, we didn't touch them in any way, we let them come out onto the sand. And one thing that's really amazing about turtles is that they will actually be able to imprint the specific magnetic fields of that beach, and their bodies remember this information, and it gets, you know, imprinted. And because of that, 15 years later, when they are adults, they will return to this exact spot on the beach to lay their eggs. And this was such a cool experience to just watch these tiny little baby sea turtles, you know, get used to their environment, you know, get a feel for the sand, for the beach, absorbing presumably all of those magnetic fields, and then slowly but surely making their way towards the ocean. So if you ever get a chance to do a similar activity, I highly recommend it. This is not something that you have to leave the country for. There's plenty of places within the US that offer this type of activity, so definitely recommend it. So the other cool experience we did at the Four Seasons was a sea foraging experience. So we met up with our guide Pedro, and he is extremely knowledgeable. He grew up in the area. His father was a fisherman. He's a fisherman. So he knows this coastline up and down. He's also a dive master. He's a kayaker. So I mean, he knows the land, he knows the water, he knows the rivers near there. Like, this guy just knows it all. So the idea with sea foraging is that you're essentially going around exploring the beach and finding edible things. So finding things that nature would provide to us naturally that we could actually survive on. And the thing that made this experience so cool is that the previous day we had spent, half the day at the beach. And to us, it was just like, oh, here's our cabana, here's some sand, and here's some water, and that's it. After doing the sea foraging experience though, it kind of opened our eyes and we suddenly saw the environment in a whole new way, and we realized, wow, it's not just cabana, sand, beach, there's life everywhere. And because we hadn't been paying attention or we didn't know what to look for, it was just invisible to us the day before. But now we're looking at the beach and this whole area in just a completely new light. So that was really kind of a revelation for us. So the first thing we did was to go to the rocky areas at the edges of the beach, and we looked for, and I'm not even sure exactly what these were. I don't think we ended up talking about the specific term, but they're kind of like sea snails or sea slugs, or maybe they're just mollusks. I'm not really sure. For the rest of this video, I will call them sea snails, but if you know, please leave a comment and correct me, because I would love to know what the correct name is. So it was really fun kind of going to these rocks and taking these little sea snails off, kind of twisting them off because they kind of have a suction power to the rock, and then putting them in our cooler. And we were saving these up for a very specific purpose, which I will share with you later in this video. So we had actually started this activity a little bit later in the day than he usually recommends, just because of some scheduling stuff with other things we had going on during the trip. So typically if you're going to do sea foraging, going earlier in the day is a little bit better, especially if you're at a resort that's being kept up, because the staff of the resort will actually sort of clean up the beach, so remove some of the seaweed and things like that that wash onto shore. But despite of that, we still found some really cool things. So there was actually this whole school of sardines that had washed up onto shore, and so we picked them up. There were these little, sadly no longer alive sardines, and while those were not safe to eat right then and there, Pedro told us that if you were to leave these out to dry in the sun for a day, the next day you could actually eat these and they'd be nice and crunchy and salty. He also showed us this tree that grows near the water that has these fruits, which he calls sea grapes. There's these tiny little fruits. You peel off the outer layer, that's kind of a hard green peel. And then inside, it's very much like a grape, but with a bigger pit in the middle. And so both Serge and I tried it, and it's just a fruit that has pretty high water content. So if you're ever in a bind where, you're out of water, there's nothing to drink, just eating a few of these sea grapes can help keep you hydrated. We also explored the caves that were near the beach. And again, this is something that we completely did not see the first day because we were just kind of staying on one side of the beach. I had no idea that just a few steps away, there were these really cool caves right there. And in these caves, there were actually bats, and we saw them kind of flying around inside. And again, one of those things where we never noticed the sound before, but once he pointed out, hey, listen to that sound, that's the sound of the bats, then suddenly we couldn't unhear it, and we knew, like, oh, those are bats. Another thing that we found during the foraging was these big nuts that had washed onto shore. And so Pedro told us that these nuts actually don't grow anywhere near this area. They grow, about 8 to 10 to 15 miles away. And what happened is that they grow near rivers. And so they probably fell into the river, then that got into the ocean, and then the ocean washed them onto shore. So a couple of the nuts we found were no good to eat because water had gone inside. So the inside was kind of rotting. But he did find one that was good to eat. So he cracked it open. We basically all shared it, and it tastes kind of like a really mild almond. So again, this is kind of a food that is great to have in cases of emergency. It can give you that energy to keep you going. And we found some other interesting things along the way. We found a hermit crab, which was really cool. And we also found a washed up dead pufferfish, which I don't think I've ever seen in real life. So that was really interesting to see. Obviously, the dead, rotting pufferfish was not edible, but it was just kind of a cool thing to look at. So as if this whole sea foraging experience wasn't cool enough as is, what happened at the end of the experience is Pedro handed the cooler full of the sea snails that we had collected to a staff member at the resort. They gave it to the chef, who actually cooked the sea snails, turned it into this delicious stew that we ate later that afternoon by the pool. And they served it with toast. And so it was a great way to kind of like, pile the stew onto the toast, eat it that way. It was really delicious, very garlicky, kind of like escargot, like that kind of preparation. So that was really amazing to see that these things that we collected on our own actually turned into a delicious dish. So the only negative thing I would say about the sea foraging experience, as I mentioned, it made us see the beach in a whole new light. And that was a positive thing for most of us, except for Ella. It kind of freaked her out knowing that every single one of those little holes in the beach had crabs in them. And Ella and animals don't always mix that well. If you go through and watch some of our older travel vlogs, you'll see that on just about any trip that has animal encounters, Ella does not have a very good time. So unfortunately for the rest of the trip, she was kind of freaked out by the beach because she felt like anytime she walked, like all these crabs would be coming up and grabbing her foot and biting her. But despite of that, the girls learned a lot, we learned a lot. It was a really cool experience. Okay, check out this video if you want to see how we brought our homeschooling lessons to life through travel last month. We spent the month studying the Mayan civilization and then actually traveled to the ancient Mayan city of Chichen Itza to see it for ourselves. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Be sure to follow us on both Instagram and TikTok. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.